Hello everyone, this is Bonsert of Radio Retro Future, and welcome to another episode of what I call Steampunkish, a kind of a series of videos in which I talk about media relevant to the steampunk canon. And on today's topic I want to talk about a film that has appeared on Netflix and YouTube, called The Secret Garden. First off, I need to say I am not much of a movie goer. Few trailers have grabbed my attention these last couple of years, except for the surprisingly good Alita, and remakes of various superior movies like Blade Runner and Ghost in the Shell. And the more indifferent I feel about the latter two, the better. I find it appropriate these movies come to mind because it's typical of the kind of fiction I enjoy. Movies like The Secret Garden are not among them. But there was another movie I've looked forward to. Joker, a low-budget movie that dared to do something new with a movie genre that has thoroughly been abused. You might as well call it a gimp at this point. But unfortunately, people keep throwing their money at it, so they keep beating that cash cow, and attempts to compensate for a lack of actual plot with copious amounts of CGI. Then here comes Joker, where we have a scene of a guy dancing in a public bathroom. But that scene is more memorable than all the stuff put together in most Marvel films. And that brings me to The Secret Garden, a movie that didn't have millions of dollars, and its decor is made of plastic plants and toilet rolls. Yet I rather see such feature films than what Hollywood puts out these days. If something needs to break in the corona crisis, please let it be Hollywood, so these animators can work on something more interesting for once. And with that rant out of the way, time for a segue.
These pins, where did you get those? From the box you're standing on.
Anyway, The Secret Garden. Movies like this are hard for me to review, and it's clearly made on a budget. It doesn't make it immune from criticism. As a matter of fact, I just learned an indie film called Twisted Pair was published on Netflix. This is also an indie film, but it's also an internet meme. You see, this film is directed and funded by a man called Neil Breen. The name sounds like something an alien would give himself, which is an apt way to describe Neil Breen's films. Not only is it notorious for their poor use of stock footage, the dialogue, the characters, the sets, everything looks like a child's perception of the world one could mistake for parody. But no. As a matter of fact, Breen is so impressed with his own work, he made a video course on how you can make quality films like his. But what about genre? Well, for those irregular watchers of my channel, I'm working on my first book, so I let people read it. Many of my friends and people I know on the internet are fantasy readers. They wouldn't pick up science fiction or steampunk for that matter, out of habit. Despite that fact, they have no affinity with the subject matter. They respond with, "It's not my thing, but I enjoy reading it." This is, as far as I'm concerned, the best compliment you can get as a writer. So I suppose the question is, do I like The Secret Garden despite being what it is? The best way for me to describe it is whimsical, which is basically my way of saying it is what it is. A family film not intended for genre diehards like myself, and a fairy tale take on old mystery novels like Jane Eyre and the Dickens stories. A snobbish girl with estranged parents stays at her uncle's estate, which is essentially a factory. But what do you know, her parents go missing and now she has to stay at the manor. Meanwhile, strange things are afoot, and the staff are hiding secrets from her. And that is all I can say without going into spoilers, because this movie hinges on its mysteries. It's not a bad setup actually, and the writing ain't bad either. But as I said, this is not my genre. This is relevant because when you're a fan of something, you're more likely to stretch your suspension of disbelief. For example, MechWarrior, a franchise about big robots fighting each other. Despite all the work to add realism to this universe, like Clark Tech and absence of warships, and political treaties that forbid planetary bombardments, there are probably more than a few problems to point out that giant robots would never work. But damn it, we want giant robot battles! The same goes for steampunk and its fetish for steam power, even though the steam in the name is supposed to represent an era in history and not a mandatory power source. Anyway, my point is that I, who is a stickler for writing, needs to suspend his disbelief somewhat. I'll take Joker again. I'm happy that I've seen it in cinema, but I'll probably not rewatch it for a while because it does have its problems. And if I watch it again, those will be magnified. The same goes for The Secret Garden. Things I didn't notice right away became more noticeable. I started thinking about them. When you try to explain that away, then another problem props up, and another, till it just becomes a cascade of issues. Especially when you already know the answer to the questions. But that is a problem for all mystery novels. So what you want your mystery film to hinge on is its execution. Take the movie Citizen Kane, which is all about figuring out the meaning of the word rosebud. Now I know the meaning of the word rosebud. Would I watch it again? Yes. But that's because it's the story not about a mystery, but about a man's rise and fall. The statement rosebud was the result of the character looking back on his life, considering all of his achievements and memories, and concluding he only cared about one small little thing. The Secret Garden is at its strongest for me when the mystery is still going strong. But the biggest reveal happens halfway. In the beginning, the villain seems to have some nuance to him, but no. That is when I started to lose interest. Still, the movie manages to throw me some curveballs in the second half I didn't see coming, and actually kinda liked. Enough to reinvigorate my interest at least. But some of these were answers to questions I didn't ask and therefore didn't care about. There were hints earlier on that things could have been the case, so it didn't entirely come out of nowhere. But they didn't connect for me. One of them was that the villain did villainous things.
Well, spank my ass and call me Charlie. Isn't this exciting?
Except this review only mattered to the characters themselves, not to us. It's one of those things that are story-wise important revelations, but the viewer already knows. It's like those liar-revealed plots that are common in Disney movies. You know people are going to figure it out. But for me, it did not affect me at all. The bad guy was obviously the bad guy. Piling on more evil acts onto a bad person doesn't make them more villainous, or interesting for that matter. The other reveal was more interesting, but it was revealed so late in the movie I didn't care anymore. Which is a shame because it has far-reaching complications to consider. However, this is a movie that wants you to enjoy the setting. It does not necessarily want you to think. This is not so much a criticism, it's part for the course when it comes to fairy tales, really. However, if you are somebody who doesn't like to stretch their suspension of disbelief, like I do, you might find it a bit too much. A nitpick, maybe, but still. It's kinda like a video game setup where a particular task does not get resolved until the player gets involved, and then takes a look behind one of the curtains. I always wonder if it is like this by design or just poor choices. As for the acting, it's good to okay. It's what I expect of a production like this. I didn't like the main character at the beginning, not because he was supposed to be unlikable, it was the cartoonish portrayal of her unlikability. They even took it so far as he was seeking out other characters just to be unlikable to them. Fortunately, this fades away once he hears her parents have disappeared over an ocean somewhere. Let's just say her changing behavior isn't very gradual. It doesn't help that the characters act more emotionally engaged than the scene suggests, making the acting feel forced in places. That being said, however, I was pleasantly surprised by The Secret Garden and found the shoestring budget sets more memorable than what Hollywood has farted out over the past 10 years. But wait, what about the costuming? I can already hear the community scream. People liked that about the trailer, didn't they? Oh well. If you like steampunk conventions, you'll like the costumes. I don't know what else to say about it. They could have gone for a more traditional Victorian look, but that would clash with the setting. However, I have difficulties praising it either, because it's so typical of what I've seen on fairs and online. I don't want to call it generic, obviously it isn't, but it feels generic in the steampunk sense. If that's what you want, that's what you'll get, and there's nothing wrong with that. As for me, Last thing I want to talk about is the music, which is used very well. Not in the sense that it stood out to me. I wouldn't be surprised if it's just stock music, but its application. is used very well, adding tension to scenes while very little action is actually taking place. It kind of reminds me in that sense of old BBC productions like the early Doctor Who series. It just shows how important the post-production process is, especially for low-budget productions. To conclude, I can recommend The Secret Garden, or at least watch it just once if you're a fan of the steampunk aesthetic. Especially as a family film, it works well and achieves its intended purpose. And it's freely available on YouTube, so nothing is stopping you in that regard. A worthwhile addition to the steampunk canon. If you want my take on the steampunk genre, please check out the Association of Ishtar wiki, where we have a collection of short stories focused around the investigations of the Association of Ishtar. We also have a short comic book in the works, which I hope to have more news on very shortly. And with that being said, thank you all for watching, and as always, make things your way. Goodbye.